This is the Norfolk Animal Rights Extremism Exposed Facebook group. A group that exposes Norfolk animal rights extremism, like this. And this.
So I can't hear you back, is that why you're doing that?
I'm not, you're very angry.
Of course I'm angry, you're involved with killing animals. You've come here to defend people that kill animals. Doesn't that make you angry? Killing in general? Wouldn't that make you angry?
This is the group's mission statement, which doesn't really say anything meaningful. For over a year now, animal rights extremists have been protesting outside Norwich Livestock Market, as well as other agricultural facilities in Norfolk. They make extensive use of social media to further their cause. It's time we used it to further ours. I don't know what their cause is, but presumably backing British farming, judging by the picture at the top of the page, meaning backing the Holocaust of animals for hamburgers and bacon. Looking at their videos, it becomes apparent that this group are against the Norfolk animal rights group, the Norwich Livestock Market Animal Save, because of the way that they disrupt business for the livestock market and are making the lives of farmers difficult when they just want to drop off the animals and then just leave, presumably. The activists at the livestock vigils want to share footage and photographs on social media of the animals that will be sold within the livestock market to be slaughtered for meat products. Now, usually it is the case that when a vigil is held at a slaughterhouse, this is my understanding from the few that I've been to in the past, the organisers of the group, from my understanding, will try to make an arrangement for the slaughterhouse management to set aside at least a few trucks for a few minutes before entering the slaughterhouse so that the activists can live stream and film and take pictures of the animals to share on social media, just to remind them that, you know, these are the victims and look into their eyes and have empathy, that kind of thing. This becomes a bit more tricky with a livestock market, since the farmers are just transporting their own animals into market and auctioning them off, thereby paying a fee for having the privilege to do that. And on the other hand, it's usually the case that the HGV driver is probably subcontracted or employed to transport animals from factory farms to slaughterhouses, so it makes sense that there's a bit more control over being able to set aside trucks. You can't really do that when there's sole traders involved who you're trying to get business from, you know, for your livestock market. So you're going to see scenes like this, and we're going to have pages like Norfolk Animal Rights Extremism off the back of unmanageable animal rights activism such as this. To be honest, I went to the first of the vigils at the Norwich Livestock Market last year, just went to one, and it didn't really sit comfortable with me because of how confrontational it was. The animals were stressed out due to the erratic driving methods of the farmers getting agitated. I didn't really feel like I was doing anything that was effective for advocating veganism because I felt like I was just preaching to the choir on Facebook about it. So that's the reason I don't really do it anymore. I have no qualms about what the activists are doing, though, trying to raise awareness for the victims, so that people have an idea of what's going on. The public have a right to know. But who knows, maybe I'll show up at one of these vigils again just so that I can have a chat with one of these Norfolk animal rights extremism exposed counter-protest activists and press them on their pro-Holocaust philosophy. If there's one good thing to come out of the livestock vigils, it's this gem of a Facebook page which is gaining attention and a lot of engagement thanks to the very topical subject of veganism right now. I don't know if the counter-activists would want to speak to me, because judging from whoever runs their Facebook page, they have an ill-formed defence for carnism consisting of vegan activists are extreme and farmers have their livelihoods, da-da-da-da, which of course is not an argument for pro-Holocaust. So today I'm going to wreck this particular post I found to be most sophistical on their page. So it says, what do you think? We think that if you get rid of speciesism, You essentially remove humans from their natural place in the food chain. You can be a speciesist and keep your natural place in the food chain if that's the moral frame you operate by. But if we were to conduct a moral debate and you deployed naturality as the metric for determining moral value, I would assume that you would reject it if it were deployed against you. If it's natural to kill you because of your ranking on the food chain, then by extension you would advocate for the murder of all sentient life if it ranks below you on the food chain. So that includes your mum if she has her consciousness transported into a chicken. She's your mum and can communicate with you via pecking messages onto your iPhone, but her mind is now just trapped inside her chicken body. She texts you, "I love you, son. Please don't chop me up for KFC." She's waiting to have her throat sliced for popcorn chicken. Do you, A, bite the bullet on murdering your mum because of her natural place, and biting the bullet of a holocaust of infinite copies of your chicken mum because it's natural too? In fact, everything that actually happens to matter is natural, actually. You can gouge out her eyeballs and hammer nails into her neck and fasten her to your bedroom wall so she can't text you back. Son, you're using a basic bitch nature fallacy. Mum knows best. Please go vegan. Or do you, B, reject natural place on the food chain as the metric for determining moral value because it's totally absurd and makes you look, frankly, quite fucked up? But you contradict yourself by affirming and rejecting natural place at the same time. Basically, what you're saying is P and not P at the same time. It's a logical contradiction. The maintenance of society is built around speciesism, such as pest control, guide dogs eating meat, etc., etc., whereas racism is not necessary to the maintenance of society. I would just add, anymore. Yeah, so the first glaringly obvious error is the appeal to culture. If it were necessary to maintain society based on racism, i.e. slavery as it used to be, would it then become moral to be racist? If no, then you can't make out like speciesism is categorically different to racism without spelling out what is true for animals, which, if true for humans, would justify discriminating against them. And saying maintenance of society is built around speciesism doesn't actually say anything about the morality of speciesism. You're merely just using a description of what is rather than what should be. Now, in a moral debate, you would be expected to give prescriptive reasoning as to why the Holocaust is right, rather than just describing what the Holocaust is built on. Just simply saying the maintenance of something is based on something isn't interesting to a moral discussion about why the Holocaust is believed to be wrong. And this is actually the discussions that vegans are interested in having. Also, pest control. I don't see how this is distinguishable from industry deaths, which I have already covered in my last video. You can go check that out here. But basically, you're going to have difficulty convincing anyone outside of this particular quadrant because most people aren't going to agree with you that stabbing humans and animals is okay if they can't specify anything true for animals, which if true for humans would justify killing humans. And you're going to have a hard time convincing people that we would ban all industry, transportation and manufacturing by virtue that humans die as a result of those industries. In fact, 9% of victims of car accidents are actually children, and yet we continue to drop our kids off at school every day. Yet such things are currently and will continue to create greater net well-being for humans, and so we think that it's a good trade-off. And I haven't heard a reasonable explanation for why they wouldn't become safer and pose nominal wildlife deaths in the future, given technological advancement. Industry and car deaths justified, and yet crop deaths not justified? This makes no coherent sense. I'm not even going to entertain the rightness or wrongness of guide dogs when people clearly have a hard time understanding why the Holocaust is wrong. It just seems pointless teaching someone, something like trigonometry before they have learnt multiplication. It's the same concept here, so I'm not even going to address that right now. On to the next point. It is not natural, therefore it is quite rightly condemned. Speciesism equals natural, racism equals unnatural. Now, if racism isn't natural and therefore is quite rightly condemned, then if it were the case that speciesism isn't natural, then it should be condemned too. However, racism and speciesism are both of this world and are both therefore subject to the laws of nature. Therefore, by your syllogism, you should condemn racism and speciesism by virtue of them being unnatural. But in fact, I think what you've meant to have said is that racism undesirable and quite rightly condemned because not all things that are inherently unnatural are desirable. Well, speciesism, if it pertains to the holocaust of animals for hamburgers, is not desirable and is quite rightly condemned. Industry deaths and fatal RTCs aren't desirable, and neither are crop deaths. But what's more undesirable is the collapse of civilization to match the pre-industrial revolution era, because we now can't manufacture medication, communicate via mobile devices, transport food, or ever leave the country we were born in. When we talk about speciesism being natural, we don't necessarily mean farming, we just mean speciesism in its rawest form. Right. Yeah, speciesism in its rawest form, that means nothing to me. What does that actually mean? Is it okay to murder humans for hamburgers or not? If no, is it okay to murder animals for hamburgers? If yes, then tell me what is true for animals that, if true for humans, would mean it's okay to murder the humans. You're going to have difficulty answering that one, and you also have difficulty claiming that speciesism is natural, if you think that racism is unnatural. And you're going to have difficulty claiming that speciesism is natural, but what you actually mean is desirable. And I'll talk a little bit further about what speciesism means so that we are very clear about what it means. So from Wikipedia, this is how the term is generally conceived. In the general context, the term is used by animal rights activists who argue that speciesism is a prejudice similar to racism or sexism, in that the treatment of individuals is predicated on group membership and morally irrelevant physical differences. Their claim is that species membership has no moral significance. Now, when we talk about group membership being the metric for moral significance, there is a clear threshold where the bar is set because we say moral significance is based on group membership. When we lose members of our own species due to agricultural or industry deaths, we are not drawing the line in the sand at group membership. We are drawing it at net well-being overall, meaning we look at how much of an impact banning these things like industry would have on the overall net well-being of humans and animals, and we say that it would have a huge negative effect on that net well-being. Enough to say that we would even include humans to be part of the overall death toll to maintain overall net well-being. Now, you can demonstrate the consistency of this argument by asking if the banning of industries would be morally justified for overall net well-being, and follow up with questions about what it would mean to ban industries. Another consideration is the fact that we have no way with current technology to reduce death toll, but this does not mean to say that this would not be the case in the future. I go into depth on the whole crop death, insect and field crop deaths argument in my last video, so please check that out. And I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit, but it's a subject that keeps coming up and keeps being presented to vegans a lot more often as we move into the current climate of veganism become increasingly popular and contentious amongst people that don't really have a clear understanding of what it actually means. But in my view, it's just simply a consistent position where you align your morals with your actions based on a moral baseline. The line of treatment that is traced by logical consistency from how you would like to be treated. So I don't think being killed for hamburgers sits on that moral baseline, but I think that it sits below that threshold. I also think that being killed to protect crops from being damaged, meaning less yields, is acceptable and sits on that threshold of neutrality. Hopefully this makes all sense to you. Again, it's a bit of a ramble, but I could do with probably refining it. But I wanted just to respond to the Norfolk Animal Rights Extremism Exposed group so that they have an idea of the argumentation that would be presented to them if they were willing to have a more meaningful conversation with a vegan than this one. I cordially invite you to have a moderator debate via my YouTube channel if you want to, or we can discuss in person at the next Norwich livestock market vigil. I feel this would be really useful going forwards and would bridge the gap between the us and them mentality that we very much see from both parties, judging by the Facebook page. In the end, veganism is unstoppable, and we need to come up with a solution to be able to cooperate with one another going forwards and to make the world a better place, rather than just a hateful place where moral advancement is pigeonholed into extremism. It's just ridiculous. The actions of activists slowing down vehicles or trying to negotiate with farmers to take pictures of the victims inside their vehicles does not supersede the action of forcing animals into slaughterhouses to be hung, drawn and quartered. As Joey puts it, have some perspective. And I would add, let's figure out a way to get along and find common ground, because resistance to the vegan movement is futile. As ever, I'm always around in the Ask Yourself Discord server if anyone would like to talk to me, and also if you would like to support my channel by donating to my Patreon, that will allow me to buy some better recording equipment to make more videos, so you can click the link here. And if you like these rambly videos, let me know in the comments what would you like me to talk about next time or respond to in the next video, and I will endeavour to keep them going. So thanks for watching everyone. Your girl, the BWP. Mwah.